Tonight's talk. Ben is a Rochester-based solo dev whose first commercial game, Chillquarium, has sold over 300,000 copies on Steam. This talk will focus on Ben's journey as a developer from hobbyist to full-timer, the experience of making, marketing, and releasing a moderately successful indie game, as well as the lessons and advice learned along the way. The talk will be accessible to anyone who is interested in making games regardless of skill level, especially other solo developers and small teams. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Ben.
Okay, thank you, Noah, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. I'll start things off by talking a little bit about what Chillquarium is, actually. So Chillquarium is, put simply, just an idle aquarium fish collecting game. This has been my passion project for the last 4 years, give or take. And it's my first commercial game that I've released. And yeah, like Noah just said, since release, it's sold over 300,000 copies, which is beyond insane to me. And time of writing, it's at 92% positive with over 6,000 reviews. So for this talk, I want to give a little bit of background about me as a developer and my sort of progress over time. I want to talk, of course, about the making of Chillquarium, both the design, the process of marketing it and trying to get people to care about it over the internet and releasing it. And I want to spend a lot of time just talking about my thoughts on making games as an indie, what to do, what not to do, how to make games alone if you want to, what kinds of games to make, and how to sort of amplify your efforts in order to get the most out of it. So we'll start a little bit maybe self-indulgent by talking about just me. I started making games when I was in undergrad in 2016. My first game was Bullet Vision. This was sort of just for fun project with my friends. And I remember I spent, I think, like 9 months working on this with a team of 3 or 4. And, the idea was like, what if instead of like the cliche of laser vision, someone shot bullets out of their eyes, which doesn't really make sense. But, it was fun, and it was like my first time learning Game Maker, getting into it. And over the next few years, I sort of kept making small games. I released 5 games on itch.io. I had a bunch of other like little prototypes throughout the years. That I didn't back up, and so they're lost to time. And, I guess first lesson here is definitely back up everything that you're working on. 10 years from now, you might be giving a talk and wish that you had more images of things you've made. But yeah, I was just sort of building up my basic game making skills. I was learning Godot and Game Maker. And I think most importantly, I was learning how to wrap up game projects. There's like literally always going to be more stuff that you could add. And so actually deciding like, no, this is done now, and I'm not going to work on it anymore is its own sort of skill, I think. And I think it's a very valuable one. Parallel to all of this, I started posting music on SoundCloud. And I think this was important just because, like, in order to be an indie, you need to be comfortable posting stuff online that is like art and might be, putting yourself out there might be like a little bit cringy. Definitely in hindsight, I think it's really embarrassing that I used to just like Google Bob Ross paintings and like pick one to be a thumbnail. But at the time I thought that was like super cool and like artistic. And a record of it exists. But then, for my first EP, my little brother did this drawing, which I think is awesome. Over the next few years, I started like making video game music that was open source. So I released 2 Creative Commons video game music albums that are free to use. And a few of these had some songs that were like actually used in real projects. The biggest one was Bone Razor Minions, which has like 4,000 reviews on Steam. And it felt like pretty cool to be like, oh, I actually made a tangible piece of this that like somebody found to be useful. Okay, I'm seeing a comment in Text. At that early stage, what helped you avoid the endless work on one project or the graveyard of ideas traps? Were you just really good at scope management naturally? Did you have the strong desire to work on something else? Was something differently entirely? I don't think that I was like really good at this. I think, my first project took like 9 months to make. And I don't know. I think that basically I would kind of just work on things until they stopped being fun and like I got so bogged down and wasn't excited. And then I was like, okay, well, I would rather have something that exists in the world than just like nothing. And so I kind of like reached this point of fatigue and then be like, all right, it's time to wrap this up. What's the least amount of work that I need to do? So it's really just more of a like reaching fatigue thing. Thanks for the question. Okay, and then January 2022 through now is when I've been working on Chillquarium. So the original scope for this was a 3-month project. That was like my plan. I just wanted to make like a little toy. And at the end of that 3 months, I decided to keep working on it just because, it was still fun. I released the game, 19 months after I started, or 19 or something. Someone else can do that math better. Some might say 21 months. And anyway, and the indie dream, it sold well enough that I can work on games full time. And now I'm working on sort of a sequel called Winghaven. You guys can go wishlist Winghaven if you want to. So I want to spend some time talking about the actual design of Chillquarium. What this game is, where it came from. The primary inspiration for this was a game called Fishville. This was like sort of like the less popular little brother of Farmville, which was like a really huge game around 2010-ish on Facebook. It was very simple. It was like you'd collect fish, you'd decorate your tank. Your fish would grow up over real time. You have to feed them throughout the day. And, I was in middle school, I think, and I really, really liked this game. I thought that it was just like super cool. I had a lot of fun with it. And the thing is, it had sort of like a gross underside to it. Which was that like it really wanted to get its hooks in you and get you addicted to playing. And if you didn't obey, it would kill your fish and make your tank gross. And I think you could probably pay to like bring your fish back to life and stuff like that. It had a lot of. I think this is recorded. To Alexis in chat. It had a lot of these like negative sort of emotional hooks for the sake of like guilting you into playing more and spending money and that sort of thing, which is like the wrong vibe for a chill sort of fish pet simulator. Related thing is that like in the original build of Stardew Valley, like animal butchery was a part of it, which is very kind of thematically funny. Just like the idea of getting this cute little chicken and then you like kill it with an axe and like get money, and I don't know. Yeah, and that was cut from Stardew Valley because it didn't have the vibes. And so that was sort of my thinking. I was like, what if this game didn't kill your fish and your beloved pets? The other part of the inspiration is that like Wordle came out in October 2021, like right around when I started working on this. And I mean, obviously you guys all remember like Wordle was huge when it came out. Like everybody was playing it. And it was like a sort of new thing to have like a game that just you log in once a day, you play for 5 minutes, and it's kind of a part of your morning coffee routine or whatever. And I really liked that idea. I thought that there was like something interesting to that. Cookie Clicker obviously was an inspiration just because I don't think I need to talk about Cookie Clicker. It's just great. Sort of granddaddy of all idle incremental games. And the third part of the inspiration is like sort of embarrassing. There's this thing called the Bizarre Beast Pin Club. This was a YouTube channel that like made a nature video every month, and you could pay $10 a month or something to get mailed a pin. But then there was like a 30% chance you'd get like a rarer color, and then a 10% chance that you'd get an even rarer color. And my wife and I were subscribed to this for a number of months, and it was just like, like middle of the pandemic, it was just something to be like looking forward to. And I don't know, I just thought it was cool to get that, like, I was able to get so much sort of dopamine and excitement from such a simple thing as like just a palette change. And similarly, shiny Pokemon is just, for those who don't know, there's like a 1 in 8,000 chance for any Pokemon to have a slightly different color palette. And, that might seem like trivial, but like some people find that very exciting. People like me, because I think rarity is like a fundamentally interesting thing in video games. Like the interestingness of something is sort of proportional to how hard it is to get. So that all came together for what was originally called Fish Game. This was a game that I finished in March 2022, so I actually met my goal, 3-month project. Very simple. Your fish grow up in real time. You can click to feed your fish, and you save a little bit of time. But your fish won't starve if you don't feed them. That was just purely there to like accelerate progress and give you something to do. And when your fish are grown, they would sell for a profit that was like proportional to growth time. So like if a goldfish grows up in 30 minutes, it sells for 2x what you bought it for. Something that takes a week to grow up would sell for like 10x profit. And that was it. It was very simple. I said this to some of my friends and family, and it was one of those things where I think if you guys make games, that like sending people games doesn't necessarily mean that they'll actually play them, even if they're people that you know. But people were actually like kind of interested in playing this, like very surprised, and was sort of new. So I basically just was like still having fun, so I decided to keep working on it. And I realized that there was 2 flaws with it. First was that the optimal strategy was just to like spam the fastest growing fish. So in this case, the goldfish, because they grow up in 30 minutes. And then just click enough that they all grow up, and then like sell them all. You double your money. You do that again with twice as many goldfish. And it's sort of trivial, and there's no reason to ever buy any other fish. And that's kind of lame. The other problem with it is that keeping adult fish was like strictly wrong, because they were taking up space in your tank, and they weren't like doing anything for you. The only benefit of a fish was to sell it as an adult. And obviously this is super bad for a virtual pet simulator, right? Like the whole thing you want for people to do is like get emotionally attached to their fish and keep them around and name them and whatever. This is this thing of like players will optimize the fun out of a game, right? Like the fun thing to do would be keep the fish, but if it's not correct in terms of numbers, that's not what anyone is gonna do. So yeah, your job is to like make the optimal playstyle be the same as the fun playstyle. So I found a couple of solutions to these problems. The first was to have like a trading card abstraction. The idea for this came from Stacklands, which is a sock pop game that's like, I think, brilliant. It's like a little colony builder, but everything is abstracted as little trading card packs, and then you make stacks of cards, and they sort of interact and do things. And I thought that was like really cool to use a video game as like an abstraction for a board game, which is itself an abstraction for something else. It just seemed like an interesting and sort of clean interface for ideas. And this also added like a little bit of design space where some fish can be more rare than others, which is of course sort of fun, at least to me. It adds a little bit of like a gambling hook. And yeah, the randomness means you can't just buy 100 goldfish and sell them as fast as possible. Like you're just going to get a random variety. So to solve the other problem, I decided that, okay, it's strictly incorrect to keep around adult fish. So what if they just like make money? How are they making money? I don't really know. I don't think that there is an answer to that. But I also think it's like not important for there to be an answer. I kind of do think as game designers, we sometimes get bogged down in like, oh, this has to make sense. And sometimes it does, but it's more important for things to be fun than it is for them to make sense. And this is like really fun and feels really good. Because you get to get paid for doing nothing. That feels great. And it gives me another hook as a designer, or like another knob, where I can say, okay, fish that take a long time to grow up are now more valuable because they earn more passively. So that kind of helped out with that. And it adds a tiny bit of decision making for the player. Not really, but when you're playing, you have a little threshold in your mind of like any fish that's earning $10 or more is worth keeping, and then that threshold grows over time. And so, it gives you something to think about a little bit. This slide is a little dense. I just want to talk about idle game progression for a bit, because you guys are game designers, and this is something I think about a lot. So my goal with Chillquarium is sort of, I want people to clock in like once a day, right? That's not malicious. That's not because I want people to be addicted and pay me microtransactions. From the beginning, I didn't want to have any microtransactions. It just seemed appropriate for a virtual pet simulator and like fun. But idle games tend to scale up exponentially. So if you play for a few minutes of Leaf Blower Revolution, you're like earning 10 more than you were passively, right? And if that's the case, then like it's not really even an idle game. Like people tend to call them incrementals for that reason. Linear scaling doesn't really help with this. You could say, oh, I just like earn a flat amount per fish regardless, but then that's, everything in the middle of your game is unnecessary. You could like log in and forget about the game for 6 months and come back later and you're done. And another design principle is that I didn't want the game to feel like a math problem. Like there are plenty of games like this and interesting and cool, but that just sort of didn't fit the like chill vibe that I was going for. So my solution to this was to have like the scaling is still exponential in the sense that you get like a flat profit margin for your fish. So it's like, double your money or something. But it is gated by real-time growth of the fish, right? So it still is like rewarding this daily play style, which is what I want. But active players can still bypass this wait time by like spam feeding their fish. So it's like, it's sort of a half measure between your active and passive players. So design takeaways, I think that ideas come fundamentally from making things. I didn't start out with some like clear idea in my head of like, oh, I'm going to make like card-based aquarium gacha game with like these idle mechanics. It started as just like a very simple like toy. And from there, these ideas kind of came out of just like, oh, there's a problem with this existing build. Like, what's a way to solve that? And I think that this really helps with like, getting over the fear of like the blank slate. Just like, start making something and some interesting ideas will come to you while you're making it that like couldn't have come to you beforehand. I think also ideas, obviously come via pay attention when you're playing games, pay attention when you're like subscribing to pin clubs, for example. Try to draw things from other places. And also ideas come from your past. Like I think nostalgia is like a hugely powerful force, both for like your own creative inspiration, but also because lots of other people have engaged with the same stuff as kids that you did. And then that sort of helps you reach those people because, tons of other people played Fishville or Insaniquarium or like, a million other aquarium flash games. And that I think helped a lot with sort of the marketing of the game. Speaking of, this is like the horrible thing that we all have to do as indies that we all hate, right? You make the game, you're having a great time, and then you have to get people to actually care about it, which is hard and just generally kind of sucks. So this is what happened for me. My initial release plan was I'm just going to put the game on Steam and make one Reddit post on r/Godot. This was sort of what I'd done for everything before, and like, my new progress was like, oh, this one's going to be on Steam, so I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. And then, in December, so like I've been working on it for almost a year at this point. I found this video, which was, Jonas Tyroller, Chris Zukowski, and it basically went through like all the basics of marketing, which is like make your Steam page as early as you can, generate wish lists, and then when you launch, those are going to be, competing against other games to get on new and trending. With like a loose threshold at the time was like 7,000 wish lists, what people were saying. Like if you get 7,000 wish lists, you'll probably be on new and trending and get front page featuring on the day that you launch. That's like sort of the basics. So I was like, okay, let me make my Steam page and do things to get people to look at it. So I made a few that were extremely bad. Extremely cringy. I had zero success with that. I got like 5,000 views on TikTok, but I don't think I got any wish list from that. I also emailed out keys to a bunch of cozy gaming YouTubers. I was like, this is the way to get people to watch my game and like, play an early build of it. Nobody made a video about it. I think I sent out like 75-ish keys. In hindsight, I think you should do more. And this is sort of the game. It's just, send out a million things and then hopefully people notice. And in my case, they didn't. I also applied to a bunch of festivals, things like Cozy and Family Friendly Games Fest and things like that. I had zero success with that as well. So basically just like a lot of stuff not working out. But the thing that did work was posting in a bunch of small-ish subreddits, I think targeting things with like 100,000 members. The reason not to go bigger is that Reddit for some reason hates artists and is mad at you if you're like self-promoting. And that tends to be more the case in like the really big subs with like 500,000 people, and less so in small ones. And I had mild success. I was able to get some wish lists. What does that mean? Leading up to release, I had 5,400 wish lists. 4,200 of these roughly was from Reddit. About 1,200 was from Steam Next Fest, which is, if you don't know about Steam Next Fest, it's just a festival like everyone is eligible for. So, I was below this threshold of like probably being able to make it on new and trending. And in order to compensate, I decided to choose a release day with just the fewest big games releasing, which I just literally I opened SteamDB and I counted which days in the next few weeks had, or like in the next month, had like the least number of big games. Didn't care what the games were that were releasing. And so I picked September 6th. And then people were like, Starfield is releasing that day. That's like the biggest gaming release of the year. Like, is yeah. And I was like, I don't know. But it's only one game. And it turns out it was a good idea, I think. Again, who knows what actually leads to success. But I think everybody else did avoid Starfield because it was a pretty light launch day and a light launch week. And I was able to get on popular upcoming one day before my game released and stay on new and trending for a full week because it's just like there was sort of very few new games coming out. And you can see like over here is like the graph of my wish list during this week, right? On the previous slide, here's like leading up to launch, and then all of these spikes are just like puny compared to what it looks like to actually just be on the front page of Steam. So yeah, this like literally, in my mind, I got extremely lucky. I was able to barely squeak in over this threshold because, I did some gimmicky sort of thing. And it worked out. And then it gets even more ridiculous because a few months after launch, Steam was running this capitalism and economy And I was looking at it and I was like, my game is fundamentally like about fish that earn money somehow. And it's just like the only progression in the game is like monetary. So I sent in an appeal, I sent an email, and they accepted the appeal. They said, you have to change your tags and make it clear to the players like that this game is capitalism focused somehow. And yeah, I was accepted into the festival after. And somehow I managed to get featuring at the very top of the festival. This is like literally, front page of Steam. There's like a huge banner for this festival, and then here's my game at the top of it. And you can see like the wishlist actions graph. Like this dwarfs even launch week. This was like insanely ridiculous. So yeah, that's sort of like the story of Chillquarium's marketing. I wouldn't say that I did everything right. I would say more it's that I did what I could, and then I got overwhelmingly lucky twice in a row. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about survivor's bias. I definitely think that this success is anomalous, like in a sense. I wouldn't say that this is like easily replicatable. I would say a lot of people have worked harder on games and made better games than me that didn't succeed. And I think any analysis of successful games should be taken with a grain of salt. Basically, I feel like it's important to have this disclaimer because I don't know. I don't want to come across as some like egotistical dude who's like, oh yeah, I just like made a better game than everyone. Like, I don't think that's true. I think that right place, right time is a huge part of success, and there's nothing you can do about it, which like sucks. And with that said, I want to disclaim my disclaimer because like I think that this is true and it's like can be helpful to keep in mind, but I don't think it's helpful from the perspective of like I've decided to make a game and I want to make it better. I think fixating on like luck and randomness can just like paralyze you and make it so that you don't do anything. And while I think it's true that hard work doesn't guarantee success, I do think it's like a strict prerequisite. Like nobody has ever like made a successful game who didn't make a game first. And obviously you guys know it's hard to make a game, right? Like you have to make the whole thing. So I think I want the rest of this talk, rather than being like, here's what happened in my case, I want to talk about things that I think are true in general and are like more generalizable for other games. So yeah, making indie games. I would say first of all, like a note about making games alone. You can do it, but only do it if you like actually want to. Rather than like focusing on the things that you are able to do now, it's more a matter of like, are you interested in learning new skills? Because anything you don't want to learn, you should find someone else to do with you. Like I think solo dev gets put on a pedestal, but you could make an argument that this is the lazy thing to do, right? Like this is the default no effort option. Like I didn't find anyone to work with, and then I didn't. So you don't have to be professional. You don't need to learn community. You don't need to learn how to hire people and work with them. Like you just are doing everything yourself. I think it's important to think about like what strengths you have, like in your position as an indie, as opposed to like a AAA studio. Number one, you have complete creative freedom. You can make whatever you want. You have an individual voice, like you're a human being rather than like a soulless corporate entity. And people care about that these days. Like I think sort of increasingly people are caring about that. And you can make something completely weird and unique. Like you don't have to convince a team of investors that your idea could work. You just have to like personally think that it can. And with that said, I think it's also important to think about like what your weaknesses are as an indie, which is just basically that scope and scale are like really expensive. So if you decide to make 100 levels for your game, that's going to take you 100 times longer than having one level, right? Or like maybe you get faster over the time, but it's still, it still scales linearly. Whereas for a AAA team, they can decide like, oh, let's have like 150 guns, have blah, 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 like, and it's trivial because they can just like hire a team, that's making these assets. So, yeah, you have no money, you have no manpower, you have no marketing team, and your game sort of needs to market itself for that reason. So, like, how do we work in this space? I think the key is to make your game smaller and more interesting. So, embracing minimalism and shrinking scope are like very key. I think that was a very important thing to me when making Chillquarium. Finding ways to amplify your effort can make it so that you can shrink your scope but still have a game that is big, or at least has enough stuff in it. And I think building around an interesting hook is like really, really valuable, because that's something that bigger studios can't do. Every AAA game is like, third-person action game. You've got a dude with a sword dodge rolling, and like, that's what they're all doing because that's a safe thing to do. And when you're operating at that scale, you have to be safe. So yeah, you can actually like build something interesting as an indie. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about that. The number one thing I think that should be in your mind is, I don't know, that's a little maybe strongly stated, but I think it's very important. Bespoke authored content is very expensive, and if you double your content, you need to spend double the time making it. So I think, leave scale to the big guys. Like, you're not going to make a game that's as big as Baldur's Gate 3. If story is the thing that you're interested in and is like what excites you about making games, I think release it in chapters, right? Don't spend all this time like making the whole game at once, and then like 6 years later you've released something. Like, make chapter 1. That's something people are sort of used to now, and it's a way to get something out there earlier. I think that if you embrace this constraint of like, I need to make a game that will work on a single screen, I think that can be really valuable. That's also something I was thinking about with Chillquarium. I think there's like a ton of benefits to this as an indie. So it forces you to keep the scale small. Like, you can't. This is like a weapon against scope creep, like built into the very nature of the thing, right? Like, you can't make your scope too big because it has to exist on one screen. It also forces you to find something interesting to do, right? Something new. Because you're not just building like, some big open world to explore. It's like, well, what could I do new with like the actual gameplay itself that would exist on a single screen? It forces you to sort of iterate the core gameplay loop. And the other thing is that screenshots and clips are super, super important. Like, people will click on your game or not based on, I think, whether they understand and can parse any given screenshot. So if the game exists on a single screen, like, you can look at a picture of Balatro and be like, even if you've never played it, you can kind of see what's going on, because that's the whole game. In terms of hooks, I think, if 1 hour of content isn't interesting to a player, like, content also won't be interesting. So, try and build around a hook. Try and come up with something that's, maybe too risky or too niche or too weird for a bigger studio to, really take on. Hooks can be like a lot of things. Obviously, this could be sort of its own talk. But, a common one is like a genre pair, right? It's like, I don't know, Slay the Spire meets like a shoot 'em up thing. It could be a particular mechanic. It could be just the art style. It could be the vibes. I really do think that in some sense, like, the hook of Chillquarium is vibes. Like, it's in the name. And, everything in the game is designed to be relaxing and sort of cozy. The other benefit of a hook is that it's really good for word of mouth. If people can very quickly and easily describe what is interesting about your game to their friends. So Yomi Hustle on the right here. This is a game that's like, it's a traditional fighting game, but instead of being input based, it's turn based. So everyone has like perfect execution, and it's all about the strategy of it. So if you're into fighting games and your friends are into fighting games, describe that quickly, and they'll understand what the game is, and either be interested or not. Hooks are super important. I think as an indie, you have no scope, no scale, but you still need to make big games is the problem. And if your game is set up such that like you put in 10 hours of work and you get 10 minutes of content, right? You have some linear story-based thing. That could work, but it's not very scalable. And players want tons of content. This is a real review for my game. This is a fun little idler. My only issue with it is 77 hours. I've 100%ed the Steve achievements and no longer feel a $6 game that takes 80 hours to complete isn't bad at all. But I do wish there was more, right? Like, my game is being sort of criticized here for not having literally infinite content. So, there's something to be said for gamer entitlement, maybe, but at the same time, people do want, I agree. There's something to be said for like trying to give people, what they want. There's a lot of ways to do this. Like one of the, original ways is with procedural levels, right? Spelunky is obviously one of the classic roguelikes. This provides a lot of variety at a low cost. So you just sort of make a few room layouts and like some way for them to be put together. And then you have, theoretically infinite content. Obviously, the challenges with this is that a procedural level might not feel as interesting as an authored one. And you really want your game to feel fresh on like the nth playthrough, like on every arbitrary time that you play it. And this tends to be true more for system-based games than for like, traditional, like, I guess, level-based games. So, Minecraft, Noita, Spelunky is pretty systems-based where you go, oh, there's like a spider fell through like a dart trap and then blah, blah, blah. Like, it's the interesting thing comes from systems and everything. And this works really well in that context. Combinatorics is like a huge effort amplifier, fundamentally. Just take advantage of random combinations. So we'll take like Balatro as an example, right? We have 150 jokers, which is like a good amount of authored, right? Like that takes a while to find and build. It's true, but you can't eat Chillquarium. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the joke from the thing without context. Anyway, so 150 jokers, like that's a good amount of content. But then the number of ways to combine 5 of these, 500 million. So the amount of content you have, in some sense, scales exponentially with the effort that you're putting in, which is like really great, obviously. And the downside is that now you have this like crazy scaling thing with millions of combinations that you, right? I don't really know how to do that. I obviously don't think that's an easy thing to do. I don't think there's such thing as an easy game to make. But if you can do it right and if you can make it work, then you can have a game that has like sort of infinite content, which is awesome. What I've done to sort of amplify my effort is with gacha mechanics and palette swaps. If you don't know, gacha just means sort of like random rare pulls, basically. So in Chillquarium, there's 182 fish, and each of these are just one sprite and one baby sprite that I've drawn. I don't need to animate them because you squash and stretch a fish across the screen, and that looks good enough. And having that combined with just color variants and different rarities, sort of gives the game content, even though all I've drawn is, in some sense, 180 assets. The problem with this, or like the difficulty, is this could come across as, stretching content or whatever. Some people don't like this kind of game, obviously, and will call you out for it being tedious, and many people, of course, have in Steam reviews. In my case, this is something I actually like to do, like as a player. This is my real Pokemon Sapphire game, and I have 7 full odds shinies in here, and this is like 250 hours of me running around in the grass because I'm a psycho. So to an extent, I think it's not like I'm faking this and just being malicious to players. This is actually just something that I personally like. Okay, another thing that's very important is making your game look nice. And especially if you're a solo developer, maybe what you're interested in is programming or whatever, and you're not coming at it from a place of being an artist. I definitely don't think of myself as an artist. But your game, unfortunately, still does need to look nice. So how can we do that in a way that's sort of efficient? I think the key is trying to focus on making it look interesting. Like I said, I think screenshots really sell games. I think it's more important for your game to be interesting than it is for it to be good looking in a traditional sense. So Cruelty Squad here, for example, does this game look good? Sort of no. In some sense, it looks hideous, right? But it looks super interesting and very stylish. And I think having that kind of mentality can be really useful as an indie. Another way of doing this is having a limited path. It's a very simple way to add some intentionality, and it makes your game polished and professional. Obviously, there's a bit of a cliche here where you have pink. There's tons of games that look like this, so maybe don't pick specifically this color palette, but doing something like this is a simple way to make your game look more professional. This example on the right here, He Is Coming, is a pretty new game, and just notice that there's some detailed line work and sprite work here, but there's literally no shading in anything. So everything is 1-bit, and it looks pretty great in my opinion, just the collection of colors that they've chosen. I haven't actually played this game. I just saw it and thought it looked really cool. So okay, post-processing effects are huge. This is a totally scalable way of making interesting and unique looking art assets. The example of it from Chillquarium is pixelation filter. This isn't unique or new or anything, but it's basically I figured there's 100 million pixel art games out there. There's not nearly as many that look quite like this. So it just makes the game, stand out a little bit more. The other examples here, Short Hike, things in the distance kind of fade away to nothingness, but then they're super cool, right? That's that's just you write some shaders and you're done, and your whole world looks cool, right? Obviously, Return of the Obra Dinn and Buckshot Roulette, they have cool things going on. In terms of processing shaders, and then whatever you put in front of the camera is going to look and stylish. Retro aesthetics, I think, also are huge for this. There's the added benefit of people are nostalgic, and that will make them like your thing. This might make it easier to make individual assets. I'm picturing modeling the trees in dusk, and I think I could probably do that even without any experience, whereas, if you're going for a high-res art style, that's going to take a lot longer. I want to shout out Nubby's Number Factory for going for the Windows 98 look, which is awesome. And again, in some sense, you might look at this game and think it looks hideous, but I think it looks awesome. And it definitely looks interesting. So And the last thing about making games that look good is I think you sort of have no excuse for not getting really good at making game UIs, for the simple reason that it's the fastest and easiest way to make a good looking game. Obviously, there is some stuff you're going to need to learn, but I think it's going to be, it'll take you years and a good enough illustrator to make some nice looking backgrounds. But you can probably figure out some sort of shader for your background, like pretty quickly. It's trivially easy to draw inspiration from other. Look at what they're doing, and then you can do that too. And it's not going to seem as much like a quote unquote ripoff if what you're taking is like menu elements. It's like nobody's going to be upset about that. There's a really great online database for this. These slides should be, I think, will be shared, so you can just click on that link. I also think parametric backgrounds are huge. This is part of the reason that Bellagio is brilliant. He didn't have to make any background art for the game. And then he has numbers that he can tweak that changes like the color palette and like how much it's swirling and things like that, in order to match like the tone and the mood of whether you're in the shop or whether you're in a boss fight or whatever. Tween everything, make things move smoothly, pay attention to sound effects, etc. Font is actually important. I didn't use True. My wife is, among other things, a graphic designer, and I used to make fun of her for like having such strong font opinions. But now my eyes have sort of been opened, and I realized that it makes a big difference in what sort of tone is conveyed by text, like just what font is used. And yeah, overall, like with UIs, it's really easy to steal ideas. Here's one quick example from Chillquarium. At first, I had these, fish cards looking like they did up top, where like they have to fit in the card. And they look kind of terrible, in my opinion. Like, they look very underwhelming. You see, like, new, rare, and you can barely, like, you have to squint to see it. And I played this game, Wild Frost, and realized, like, they're going for the same sort of cards as an abstraction aesthetic, but then they boundary break and they, like, animate like that. And I realized there's nothing wrong with this isn't a literal trading card. Like, there's no reason to do that, and it looks way better to have the fish like zoomed in, and yeah. So yeah, that's sort of it for my talk. Overall, I think try and make games that are small and interesting. Try and find ways to amplify your effort with them bigger, despite not spending infinite time on them. And I think ideas come from making things, starting from somewhere, and then iterating. Rather than like coming up with some perfect idea and then making it. Yeah, that's my talk. I think if anyone has questions, feel free to share them in the text channel.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah,
we will fly on over to the general voice channel and do our live Q&A over there. Just a reminder before we go over, please mute yourself when you're not speaking, or switch to push to talk, just so we don't have like a lot of noise. If you don't, I might have to use my mod powers, and then I'll shoot you a DM and we'll get you sorted. So with that said, let's go ahead and move over to the live Q&A. Thanks again, Ben.